here at the eBay Entrepreneur of the Year Awards, celebrating 25-year of the awards. I think CNBC-TV18 has been part of the eBay Awards pretty much from the start, from the very inception. And I think I've done about 17 of these, including watching Uday Kotak win the World Entrepreneur of the Year Awards at Monte Carlo. So, gentlemen, an absolute pleasure. Many, many thanks for joining us here this evening. Before I talk to you about your lessons from entrepreneurship, since we are talking about building a better India, let's start by talking about the bet on India. And Mr. Kotak, I'm going to start by asking you, what we are seeing at this point in time is a surge in confidence. You talk to a domestic CEO, you talk to a global CEO, everyone seems to suggest that India is the place to be. This is going to be our year, our decade, our century. Take your pick. But if I were to ask you to identify for us the trends, the top 3 or 5 mega trends that give you the most confidence on why you believe we must have conviction in the India story.
Thank you, Shereen, and it's great to be here at the EY Awards, though in a different role. So I think the India story has to start with leadership. We have an amazing leadership at the country level, and under Prime Minister Modi, we're really surging forward as a very stable, sustainable country. I think that's extremely important for sustained growth of a country. And I would say that as the #1 point. In addition to that, I think India has positioned itself beautifully in the global geopolitical scene. We have friends at the same time with most countries. At the same time, we have our own interests in every respect. I've never seen the kind of attention and the presence India gets on any global table today. Never before. And I think this is a good harbinger for how we can take on a global leadership. Third, India has handled COVID outstandingly and positioned ourselves to a situation where we have a solid macroeconomic stability, a sound improving fisc, and a controlled current account. So all the fundamentals for India to take off are in place. And combine this with a much greater focus on building a sustainable growth as distinct from hit and run is something I believe truly. And Indian entrepreneurship is for us all to see in this room how wonderfully Indian entrepreneurship is flourishing at this point of time. Having said that, I do believe that India needs to be like that good batsman and not make bad shots from here, but build a long innings. Think about this as a long-term...
As a test match and not T20?
I would much rather have it. I'm a great believer in cricket. But let's not make it T20, at least a one-day match.
Okay. All right. But Mr. Kotak, I have a follow-up question for you. You know, you talked about the fundamental reasons why you believe we are in a good place at this point in time. Let me ask you about the financial sector. Things are looking a lot better. There has been a significant cleanup. The balance sheets are strong across the banking sector. But do we have enough wherewithal within the Indian banking sector to drive and fuel the kind of growth that we aspire for?
See, first, Shereen, I must say, and I must give credit to the government and to all our policymakers, including the RBI, for actually navigating the ship through very troubled waters, particularly in the last few years. COVID, oil shock, Russia, Ukraine, India's macroeconomic stability is phenomenal. We have also cleaned up the balance sheets of banks and financial institutions. I also see a long-term trend of a country of savers becoming a country of investors.
That's not good news for banks, though. You're going to fight very hard for deposits.
I am a believer that financial services is an intermediation game. So in case you forget, in addition to banks, we are into asset management, broking, insurance, and everything else. Therefore, we have a holistic view about the future of financial services. So we have many, many things going for us. And we really now need to focus on structured capacity building in the financial sector for us to take off and actually be able to support Sajan Jindal, Chandra, and many, many other entrepreneurs and professionals to fuel India's growth and finance India's growth.
Well, speaking of financing India's growth, and Sanjeev Bajaj, let me, link this to the kind of growth that you've seen as far as your own company is concerned just in the last 5 years. And to borrow from Mr. Kotak, it really has been a takeoff. I mean, assets under management have gone from, 50,000 crore rupees now to over 3 lakh crore rupees at this point in time. CAGR of 27.5%. If you were to extrapolate the kind of growth that you have seen within the company, as well as the potential for growth that you see for the economy, what are we talking about? I mean, what could AUM possibly look like over the next 5 years?
So, it's tough to follow after somebody like Uday, but let me start by saying that everything Uday has talked about, we've tried to execute. And that's the opportunity that India presents. And even though we've been fortunate to be in a position with a large focus on consumer lending and lending to SMEs to get to the size that we have, we think we get to work every day believing, like Bezos said once, it's day one. Because there is just so much more opportunity out there. And to this point, you have to be sensible. We are eventually in the risk business. We have to understand how to manage risk. But if you do things sensibly, there is so much opportunity the country offers us, and very much like with Kotak, we are now present across lending, insurance, more recently asset management. We have digital platforms in health, and in each of these, we are seeing tremendous opportunity going ahead. So to your question, I think the sky's the limit as long as you're sensible about it. There will always be cycles. We have to keep in mind, we are living more and more in a globalized world. So business is not going to grow only in one direction.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to weather the storms, those businesses will come out as winners.
Well, since we're talking about the ability to weather the storm, what is the single biggest risk that you foresee for India today, for your business, for instance? And, how are you trying to mitigate that risk at this point in time?
So clearly, one of the biggest risks is global uncertainty. And if it weren't for that, our economy would have been growing even faster. Unfortunately, there is no visibility to that end. We are talking of not a hard landing in the West, but there is still a landing. Technically, the UK is in maybe a soft recession. We are talking about 2 significant wars, the impact that has. India is just getting ready and arming itself with significant exports. Look at what the exports were till 6 months ago for the last 2 years. Yeah. But gradually those are tempering right now because eventually those markets have to be able to buy what you're producing. So to me, that is the single biggest risk we have.
Yeah, the geopolitical risk is a real one at this point in time. Mr. Jindal, let's talk about the big bets. And you're making a big bet, a 40,000 crore rupee bet that you've decided to make in the state of Odisha to try and build out the EV ecosystem. Now you're diversifying completely away from businesses that you're in and businesses that you understand. Explain to me as an entrepreneur what it takes to make that kind of a bet, what it takes to make that or take that kind of a risk as well.
So that's what is an entrepreneur, right? Where you look at the opportunity and then try to grab that opportunity. That is what is important. So today, India is passing through a phase where whatever you want to do, whatever you can do, you will be successful if you do it rightly. So, and I believe very strongly in that, and I really believe this, the shift from a ICE car to a electric car or electric mobility, I really believe in it because we have our own electricity in this country. We have, God has given us enough sun, wind, we can create renewable power. We don't have fuel oil and we have to depend all the time on importing fuel oil. So I think we need to really push the pedal to convert our country into an electric mobility country. And in the world, probably we should be the first country, besides China, which should be becoming an electric mobility country. And that's why I thought that at JSW, we can do it very well because we have a lot of experience in building large projects very efficiently. So this area is a good, interesting field, new age. So that's why.
So, what are we talking about? 40,000 crores over the next few years. That is the kind of investment that you're willing to make to ensure that this risk pays off for you as well as for the country. But you know what we have seen previously, and especially through the down cycle of 2008, is many companies, many corporations leverage their balance sheets to diversify into businesses that they didn't have the capabilities of getting into. So as you go about entering a completely new business, how are you ensuring that you create the moats in place so that this bet pays off?
So there was a time when we took a big bet when we were building our mid-90s, where we had a small company and we were taking up this huge investment because that was the phase when India was needing more steel, and therefore we were building that. But today, as a group, we are at a much different stage, and investing 40,000 crore risk is not that big a risk. It's maybe 5% of our total group size, whereas at that time it was 300% of the group size which we took. So if we could sail through that, then this is like, it's not an issue.
It's not an issue. Mr. Kotak, you know, one of the issues that I would imagine that everyone in this room in a different context will need to address at some point in time, and an issue that you've had to address as well, is transition. As an entrepreneur, as an owner and a manager, what has been the compass, what has been the guiding principles for you as you negotiate what is often a very challenging, complex task of letting go?
Very easy. The institution is more important than any individual. As long as you keep that compass in mind and focus on the institution and what's right for the institution, the individuals can come and go, but the institution must sustain, grow over a long period of time. You look at the history of some of the biggest successes in the world, in the financial sector. A JP Morgan, there was a Mr. JP Morgan once upon a time. Yeah. He's dead and gone. But the institution JP Morgan has sustained over a long period of time. Therefore, you aspire to create things which outlive you. And that's the key focus for me as an individual in the context of the institution Kotak Mahindra.
You know, this is a little bit of a backstory. So I went to see Mr. Kotak here this afternoon, and he doesn't sit at the Kotak Mahindra Bank building anymore. He sits in a different building, and I walked in there and I said, when did you decide to move to this building? And he said the very next day after he stepped down. But how hard was that decision to actually move out of what has been home essentially for you for 3 decades?
I can assure you I'm enjoying the freedom of being a private citizen for a change rather than being a regulated person. It's great fun, I can assure you.
Sanjeev Bajaj, you're still a regulated person at this point in time. But if I were to ask you, the triumphs as well as the tribulations of scale, I just pointed out, going from 50,000 to over 3 lakh crore rupees in 5 years, it brings with it its own challenges and its own complexities. How do you ensure that as you scale up, the organization continues to remain compliant, continues to remain agile, continues to remain nimble? What has been the secret sauce of ensuring that that happens?
So I can't give you all the ingredients right now, but let me share a few. One, very clearly, you have to overmanage compliance and risk. As you get larger, you have no choice because you have tens of millions of customers dependent on you, you have borrowers, and you have the regulator. I actually believe that if you get your compliance right, that can be a competitive advantage, and that's how we look at it. Second is, in a fast-growing business, we've always looked at our young stars and moved them across business lines, between business and functions, almost every 18 months. By giving them greater exposure, for the business guy to understand after spending a time in risk or operations or even an internal audit, they understand how to run a business. They understand what it takes. So a sales guy is not necessarily just a sales guy. They also see the opportunity that they have within the company, because those that get this greater exposure and do well naturally end up standing first in line when there's a larger opportunity that comes up. And lastly, what I would say is you have to keep performing for today, and especially those that are listed companies, you're performing for today, for next month, for the next quarter.
Every quarter,
But you also have to keep focusing on transforming the business. We are in a very competitive world. the digital world is affecting everybody, and especially few businesses like ours are even more affected, and you have to keep transforming while you're performing.
Transforming while you're performing. Sajjan Jindal, one of the things that I want to discuss with you, and I would imagine that many people in this room are contemplating that as well, going global. As we talk about India integrating itself with the global supply chain, as we talk about India moving up in the value chain, the aspiration of Indian business to truly go global. You do have a global business at this point in time. Is that something that you want to bolster, or given the size of the domestic opportunity today, do you believe that more and more Indian businesses are going to focus much more on India?
Yeah, so there are two points here. One is whether Indian corporations can become global. That means you go outside India and manufacture outside, or do businesses outside India. So I'm very much for that. I mean, Indian companies must become multinationals. And so that's one part. But second part is that can Indian corporations become global size in that particular field? For example, I'm in steel. Can I be one of the leading steel companies in the world?
So you're 38 million tons today. Yeah. What are you going to be in 5 years?
No, I don't know, but I don't know. I don't want to say that. But can I be?
Why not?
No, I mean, what I mean to say is, can I be a global leader in steel industry? Can there be a company which is in aluminium, which is a global leader in the world, largest in the world? Can we have 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 companies becoming global leaders from India and producing in India? So this is something which we really need to do as a country, and I'm sure we can do that. To become global leaders.
What is the single biggest impediment in being able to achieve that?
Thought process.
We
just have to think that we want to be global leader, because we have...
So think big.
Think big. We have the very big market, one of the largest markets, growing market. So we have to think big and think global. And we have to think like this, that we have to be number one in the world, we out of India.
Number one in the world, out of India. Mr. Kotak, what will it take to create not just world-class companies, but world-sized companies from India?
I think it will require a very significant institutionalization process of corporate India. There are groups and companies which are moving in that direction, but it will require a completely different mindset to get to that scale. And innovation. You just need to look at what happened yesterday in the US. In one day, the movement in NVIDIA, the stock price movement in NVIDIA, is larger than the largest group or the largest company's total market cap in India. For us to get scale, if I've really got to think about one country which does it better than anybody else, it's the United States. And it's free markets, strong institutions, I hope they remain there. And you really build something which really flourishes entrepreneurship and creativity, and combine it with process and professionalism. That's how you build scale and size, and sustainably, not hit and run.
Not hit and run. I don't want to get in the way of dinner and the awards. Let me get wrap-up comments from each one of you. And Sanjeev, I'm going to start by asking you, what is the best piece of advice that you got as an entrepreneur? And what is the advice that you would leave here with? There are many young entrepreneurs. What's the piece of advice that you would leave them with?
Okay, so that I'm being put on the line over here. The other two can think. But a lot of good advice. Single most important thing is get out of bed every morning knowing you can make a difference, you can conquer the world. And even if you fail that evening, run your business ethically so you can go to sleep peacefully, waking up again the next morning believing the same thing.
So you get a good night's sleep, I would imagine. Mr. Jindal? The best piece of advice that you got, or the best lesson that you've learned over the course of your career that you would like to share?
For any son or daughter, the best advice comes from father and mother. So my dad always used to say that, you will go through ups and downs in business, and nobody can stop that. But you just stay focused and do with honesty and hard work, and you will be successful. So that was his advice, and I've always followed that. I've always stayed very focused on my task and with commitment, with honesty, and that's where has given me the success.
And I want to go back and link this to the point that you made about creating world-class and world-size Indian companies. Is that a target that you've set for yourself, that you want to
Absolutely, absolutely,
by
without
when?
doubt.
By when?
By when is very difficult, but yeah, but maybe next 5-10 years.
Next 5-10 years. Mr. Kotak, the last word to you, sir.
And it's, you know, after the global financial crisis, I was at the World Economic Forum on a stage, and Fareed Zakaria asked me a question. What do you think the bank of the future should look like? And this is what I said then, and I believe. The bank of the future must have, or a banker of the future, or any entrepreneur of the future, must have 3 human qualities. First is simplicity. Do simple stuff, don't complicate. Second, prudence. Don't do creative derivatives and stuff like that. And third, and the most important, is humility. You are not the master of the universe. You are there to serve customers, employees, and citizens of your country. That's the advice I would like to follow for myself and for all Indians.
And it's held you in good stead, and I think that's very valuable advice that's come in from Uday Kotak, Sajjan Jindal, and Sanjeev Bajaj. I think someone that I deeply respect and admire said that an entrepreneur's job is to think about what nobody else is thinking in order to do what nobody else is doing. And many of you in this room exemplify and embody that spirit. Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations once again to all of the finalists, and thank you very, very much for joining us here this evening. Thank you very much.